Good morning, everyone. I'd like to just start off by saying thank you very much for everybody for joining. As Jay mentioned previously, we're here today with our new strategic vendor within region, Sectigo. Waving at you now is Tim Callan. I'll introduce him. I'll introduce him to you shortly. So just quickly, as Jay mentioned, any questions you have, any additional details you require, please just drop that in the chat so we can follow that up with you. My name is Calvin Wright. I am the product manager for Sectigo across the Gulf region, Africa and South Africa for Trinexia. So a quick intro to who we are. Trinexia is a pan-EMEA specialty value-added distributor and a leader in providing the most trusted solutions within the cybersecurity landscape. We are a pure play provider of cybersecurity and digital forensic solutions for both public and private sector. As I mentioned today, we're excited to be collaborating with one of our strategic vendors, Sectigo, for this virtual workshop. Sectigo is the industry's most innovative provider of comprehensive certificate lifecycle management products with automated solutions and digital certificates that secure every human and machine's identities for the world's largest brands. Its automated, cloud-native, universal CLM platform issues and manages digital certificates provided by all trusted CAs. To simplify and improve security protocols across the enterprise. Sectigo is one of the longest standing and largest CAs with more than 700,000 customers and more than 1 billion certificates issued and 2 decades of delivering unparalleled digital trust. Today on the call with me, we've got Tim Callan, Chief Compliance Officer at Sectigo. Tim has over 2 decades of experience as a strategic marketing and product leader for successful B2B software and SaaS companies, with 15 years of experience in the SSL and PKI technology space. Tim leads initiatives to optimize the customer journey across all aspects of the business and also champions Sectigo's efforts to conform with industry and regulatory requirements, including browser root programs, web trusts, CA browser forums, or the CAB forum as you may know it, and more. Tim is instrumental in driving initiatives to improve certificate agility and successful issuance. With that, I'll hand over to Tim. Tim, take us through your slides, and again, any questions, please just drop them in the Q&A section for us, and we'll be sure to get to them through the course of the presentation. Awesome, thank you. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you so much, Calvin. That was a terrific introduction. I do appreciate it very much, and I think the only bit of color I'll add to that is because of Sectigo's place in as a major global public CA and as a provider of certificate lifecycle management solutions around the world, we do have a perspective on what's going on with enterprises everywhere with regards to cryptography and changes in the industry and how those are going to affect all of us who have to use certificates every day. So today we wanted to focus in on 2 very important upcoming changes that are really going to change the way that your digital certificates, in particular your SSL certificates, work for you. And the first of those 2 is shortening certificate lifespans, and in particular 90-day public SSL, which is on the way and which will change all of our lives in a dramatic way. And then the second one is post-quantum cryptography. So quantum computers are coming, and quantum computers are going to force all of our cryptography everywhere through all of our digital systems to change. It's a major, major change in the way we're going to do computing. And these are both things that we need to be aware of as security professionals and as IT professionals. So I want to walk you through the highlights of those 2 things today. So let's start with public SSL, shortening certificate lifespans, and 90-day certificates. And before I get into this, one bit of color is that certificate lifespans have been going down. They've been going down for a long time. It could have been, 20 years ago, you could get a 10-year SSL certificate. And these kinds of possibilities just aren't here anymore. All of certificate lifespans have been shortening everywhere, and this is good for certificates. It's healthy. It's what we need. Now, the latest in this, though, is the move from 90-day certificates, and in particular, the Google Chrome product, the Google Chrome root store, intends to limit the maximum duration of a public TLS, aka SSL certificate, to 90 days. So I'm quoting here from a page that the Chrome root store maintains called Moving Forward Together. And what they do on their Moving Forward Together page is they try to telegraph the changes that they're making that are going to be good for the entire, that are going to matter to the entire industry. And this is in the spirit of giving all of us as much warning as we can get so that we can prepare for these changes that Chrome intends to implement. And I took a screen cap here of the actual bit from this page Moving Forward Together, but I'm just going to quote from it a little bit. I'm going to pull out the key points because it's a whole long thing and we're not going to read it. But in this, you see that Chrome has written, quote, in a future policy update or CA browser forum ballot proposal, we intend to introduce a reduction of TLS server authentication subscriber certificate, that's an SSL certificate, maximum validity from 398 days, which is what it is today, to 90 days. Now, you can read this for yourself. I put the URL down there, but that's kind of hard to transcribe. Just search on Chromium Moving Forward Together, and it'll be the first thing you find. And so let's break down a couple things here. The obvious thing is that, as we said, they're talking about moving from 398 days to 90 days. And we'll get into the implications of that through the next 20 minutes or so. But I want to show you a couple other things here that maybe aren't so obvious. First of all is this word we intend to introduce. When you look at the way that Chrome talks about potential future changes in this particular medium, they use two kind of terms. They say things they intend to do and things they're considering doing. And if they say they're considering something, that means their mind isn't made up. And they're very deliberate in their language. When they say they're intending something, that means their mind is made up. And we see the use of intent here. This is a plan. This is not a question. This is definitely happening. The other thing that's interesting to note here is their language on this part, where they say, in a future policy update or CA browser forum ballot proposal. Now, that might seem like an innocent little phrase, but there's a lot built into this. And you kind of need to know the history of certificate reductions to make sense of this. Because what has happened is, in the past, the maximum allowable term for SSL certificates has gone down. And in the last few years, it's gone down from 3 years to 2 years, now to 1 year, 398 days. And the way that last reduction went, the 1 year reduction, was that the CA browser forum would not pass a ballot to reduce the maximum term. So Chrome introduced it, and the CA browser forum, the browsers voted for it, but the CAs voted against it, and it got voted down. And then there was a modified ballot, and Chrome introduced that. And once again, the browsers voted for it, and the CAs voted against it, and it got voted down. So then in February of 2020, Apple just made an announcement saying, we're limiting the maximum term of a certificate to 398 days as a browser root program requirement. And at that point, that was a de facto requirement for everybody. Other browsers followed suit. The CA browser forum passed a ballot, and now it's 398 days. And so when you look at this, what Chrome is saying to us, to the community who watches this closely, is they are saying, look, we would like to pass a ballot in the CA browser forum. However, if we do not, we are still going to make this into a program update, and you're still going to have to do it. And so this is a very polite way of Chrome telling all of us that this is coming and this is how it is. Now, the last piece of color I want to put on this is these two boxes down at the bottom. And the first of them is that there's a difference between what you call a policy change and a programmatic change. A policy change, which this is Chrome saying, you cannot issue a certificate that is longer than 90 days, and if you do, you will be out of compliance with our root program requirements. That is the strong version of this requirement, because what it does is it doesn't just limit it to 90-day certs that are going to be touching Chrome browsers. It's limiting it to 90-day certs, period, everywhere, because I, as a CA, need to be trusted by Chrome. And the way I'm trusted by Chrome is I follow their root program requirements, and that means that I can't give out certs that are longer than 90 days. Now, this is important because otherwise you might rationalize. You might say, well, these are purely internal certs. They're never going to be seen by a human being. Therefore, I don't need to worry about browser compatibility. I can go ahead and I can use one-year certs under these circumstances. And Chrome is saying, no, we're not going to allow one-year certs under any circumstances. So that's a very important thing to understand. The second thing is that this also will be accompanied by a limit of DCV, domain control validation, to 90 days as well. So not only will we be reducing the maximum certificate validity to 90 days, but we will also reduce the maximum domain control validation reuse period to 90 days, which means every time you get a new 90-day cert, you need to once again re-authenticate that you control that domain. That is different now where DCV is good for a full year. It's good for the full 398 days. So if I were to give you a 90-day cert today and I did DCV, I could then give you successive certs over and over and over again for the full 398 days, and I would not have to redo that domain control validation. But with this change, that also is going to shrink down to 90 days. Now, one of the things that people, your first instinct to this might be, oh, wow, that's 4 times as many certificates. And I'm going to tell you this absolutely is not 4 times as many certificates. It is more. So first of all, 4 times 90 is 360, but last I checked, there were 365 or 366 days in a year, which means that you couldn't do 4 certificates a year anyway because you would have outages. You would have down days. And in reality, that means that it's a minimum of 5 certificates a year to keep this running. We also don't think it's really 5 certificates a year because nobody wants to let a certificate go down to the final days. So we actually think that the sensible thing under these circumstances is to get onto a nice 2-month cadence where every 2 months you're swapping out all your certs. That turns out to be 6 times a year. So in reality, this is probably a 6x increase in the number of times that certificates expire, certificates need to be reprovisioned, certificates need to be reinstalled. It's 6 times as much effort, it's 6 times as much risk. And that's the way to think about this. Now, why are they doing this? They're doing this because they're just a bunch of big meanies and they want to be mean to us? No, there are actually very good reasons to shorten certificate lifespans. And the first one is just that shorter certificates are just safer. There's what we have, a reduced risk window. If something is wrong with a certificate, let's say the private key is compromised and you don't know it, or let's say a certificate somehow is misissued. The maximum amount of time that something like that can be exploited, if the certificate lifespan is shorter, is just less. And the shorter the certificate lifespan, the less time for that to be exploited. So fundamentally, shorter certificates are safer. Another thing that's very important to Chrome is they want to encourage crypto agility. They want to encourage enterprises everywhere to be able to swap out their certificates really fast and keep it really current and keep the cryptography current. And this came up really in a big way when we deprecated the SHA-1 algorithm. So somewhere along the line, the industry decided, hey, SHA-1 is not good anymore. We don't feel good about SHA-1 as an encryption algorithm, and it has to go away. So we passed a ballot saying it had to go away. We gave everybody a year to get off SHA-1. So that gave them a year to keep issuing certs using SHA-1. And then once they did, at that point, certificate lifespans were still 3 years. So you could issue a certificate on the last day of SHA-1, and that would last for, 3 years into the future. So it was actually incredibly long. It was 39 months, to be honest. And so after we decided to deprecate SHA-1, 4 years later, there were still legitimate certs that were not misissued that were out there in the world using the SHA-1 algorithm. And this is when the browsers kind of had a wake-up moment and they said, this is not okay. We need more agility in our ecosystem. We need to be able to make cryptographic changes faster than this. And so encouraging crypto agility is a big part of this. The shorter the certificate lifespans, the faster they all cycle through and the better off we are. The third one is to encourage automation. So make no mistake about it. all of the major browsers, including Chrome, believe that certificate deployment and renewal needs to be automated. They believe that manual processes for installing and managing certificates are unworkable in our current digital environment. They are too slow, they are too error prone, they are too dependent on things like, people having a sick day or people being on vacation, and all of this is simply not okay. Our certificates need to be current, and the only way to do that is to do it in an automated fashion. And they are 100% convinced of this, and frankly, they're right. And then the last one, and this goes back to the DCV point I was making before, is the browsers really want to encourage a closer marriage of domain control to certificates. So one of the things that an SSL certificate does is it verifies that you control a certain domain, and that's very important, right? That's central to the security of the whole system and central to the whole paradigm and why we have them. And so if you are let's do a little thought experiment. Let's pretend that I own a certain domain. I get a certificate for that domain. I do DCV, and then the next day I sell the domains to someone else. Well, I own a legitimate, not misissued certificate for a domain I now don't own. Now, DCV is good for a year. So I could go up until day 364. And on day 364, I could buy a new certificate for a year. Actually, for 398 days, to be honest. And that would be issued, and that would be a legitimate, not issued certificate that is not misissued, that is issued to me for a domain that I don't own. Now, at the end of the duration of that one, on day 397 of that last certificate, I could literally own a legitimate certificate that was not misissued for a domain that I had not owned for more than 2 years. And the browsers have just said, no, that is not acceptable, no. And so their solution for that is to shorten the lifespan of certificates and also to shorten the lifespan of DCV. And I wouldn't even be surprised if those get decoupled and DCV lifespans get shortened earlier than certificate lifespans, and that is a possibility. And it makes sense, again, because what certificates are for is we want those two things married up, and right now they are not married up. So this aligns with another Chrome initiative, and again, it shows you where Chrome is going. We have passed a CAB forum ballot that says that certificates that are 10 days or less do not need to have any kind of revocation checking. They're just going to let revocation be that these certs are going to cycle out over time. And that means you don't have to run OCSP for those certificates. You don't have to do a CRL for those certificates. And so there are reasons that is perhaps motivational to the people who want to run it. And it shows, again, their focus on shortening certificate lifespan, So today we're talking about 90-day certs. Those will come soon. Those will be good for a variety of years, but it's not going to stop there. After 90-day certs, someday in the future, we're going to talk about a shorter span and a shorter span, and eventually we're probably going to be looking at a world where certificates are 10 or 7 or 5 days maximum term. And that has to be a world where everything is automated or it just won't work. And here's just a little snapshot to show you how much certificate lifespans have gone down. So I mentioned crypto agility. What is crypto agility? Crypto agility is the ability for our entire ecosystem to respond to changes in cryptographic needs in a flexible and agile manner. And this is new for us. If we think about RSA, which we'll get into, the RSA algorithm, which we all depend on, was invented in 1978. So this algorithm has been around for 45 years, 46 years, right? It's an incredibly old algorithm. And there's an entire generation of computer professionals who just grew up with RSA, and it's always RSA, and it's always been RSA, and it's always going to be RSA. But that is not the future we're going to live in. I talked about the SHA-1 deprecation. Other algorithms have had to be deprecated in the past, and everyone believes that is going to continue, and that if anything, the pace is going to increase. And so we need to have a world where our cryptography can adjust as changes happen in the environments that we're in, as then new attacks and stronger computing and other things like that force our algorithms to change. Now, associated with cryptographic agility is what we call certificate agility. And what certificate agility is the ability for all of your certificates to be in your complete control at all time. Imagine being able to replace any and all of your certificates that you have in an error-free, immediate fashion that is precise down to one individual certificate or up to all of your certificates, and where you can verify that that has occurred. That is true certificate agility. And since certificates govern all of our cryptography and ensure that everything, all of our digital systems are operating and are secure, without true certificate agility, wherever your certificate agility is lacking, that is vulnerability. It is vulnerability to outages. It is vulnerability to breaches. And so we want to eliminate that risk as much as we possibly can. And the closer we can come to true certificate agility, the closer you can come to solving that. So how do you achieve certificate agility? And you know what? We're going to touch on this again when we get to the PQC part, because it's a very similar thing. So in the interest of time, I want to move forward for that for now. And instead just talk about the fact that CLM is really the solution to all of this. It's the solution to shortening certificate lifespans. It's the solution to the upcoming PQC changes. CLM stands for Certificate Lifecycle Management. And it's a very important part of this whole ecosystem. If I run certificate lifecycle management, basically it's an automated system. It's a platform that can monitor and control and manage all of my certificates for me in order to keep all of my certificates current. It will automatically handle renewals. It will handle detection, and it's a way to bring this automation goal that we've talked about to real life and really operate it really in your environment. You do have some automation options. The best of those is ACME. ACME stands for Automated Certificate Management Environment, and ACME is the standard protocol for deploying SSL certificates. It's supported by hundreds of operating systems and pieces of software. I don't even have a count, but it's very broadly supported. It is supported by popular CLM systems, including ours. And so, for instance, with Sectigo, you can use ACME, and you can set your certificates to be automatically deployed by you. You set a certificate, and it gets installed, gets verified, and can be renewed. And you can do all of that directly from our system. So the ACME protocol is very important in your automation strategy. There are other ones. There are individual APIs. You can get software agents that you can put on your operating systems that will do this for you. And then there's some other standards like SCEP and EST. And these are also possibilities. But ACME is really the one that people have focused in on as the way forward. And I want to strongly urge you to support ACME. So, 90-day certificates are coming. Now, when are they coming? That's the one thing here that we probably need to touch on last. So the exact schedule has not been announced by Chrome. I believe that we will get a schedule this year. Chrome let us know that this was coming last year. They've given us a lot of time to work on it and think about it. I believe that there will be a CAB forum ballot introduced by Chrome in the latter, between now and the end of the year. And perhaps that ballot will pass, and perhaps that ballot won't. And if that ballot doesn't pass, I expect, based on their language that we looked at in the beginning, that Chrome is going to introduce this as a root program requirement. I think they're going to give us about a year. I think they're going to say, from whatever date they say this is a requirement, I think they're going to say you need to get this done in a year. And they'll marry it up to some sensible date, but it will basically be coming in about a year. So if you look at that, if we say sometimes in quarter 4, that a ballot is introduced by Chrome and it takes maybe 6 weeks to run a ballot program, then that would mean that either the ballot passes or Chrome makes a root program change either in Q4 or Q1. So end of 2024, beginning of 2025. If they give us about a year, then we should be looking at Q4 2025 or Q1 2026 for when this comes into play. So that's the kind of time frame where we all need to be prepared to be ready for 90-day certificates, because that seems like the sensible time frame for us to be looking at. And that means that the time to start working on that is now. So we're ready to move on to post-quantum cryptography, but I think, Jay, maybe we have a poll?
Yes, we do. I just shared it.
Okay. So we just want to know, how familiar are we with post-quantum cryptography and the threat that quantum computers are posing to our existing cryptography today? So I'd love to just get a sense for how much the audience knows about this now, and then we'll get into the details. How are we doing there? Put in your answers. Put in your answers. All right, Jay, do you want to share? Okay, we have familiar is at 0%, moderately familiar is at 20%, not familiar is at 80%. So, okay, good. I'm glad we're doing this because we have a chance to make sure that everybody is quite familiar with this when we're done. Thanks, Jay. So we can close that and move ahead. Let's go ahead and move into the post-quantum cryptography section. And again, there's a lot to discuss here, so I'm going to be giving you guys a high-level overview. And, you know, if we need to go deeper on this, maybe we can schedule another session another day or something like that to do that. But quantum computers are coming. Quantum computers are real things. They're based on how quantum physics work. And the main difference between a quantum computer and a traditional computer is that quantum computers do not have binary 1-0 gates. They have what they call, instead of bits, they have what they call quantum bits or qubits. And a qubit is a 1 and a 0 at the same time. And if that makes no sense, then welcome to quantum physics, because quantum physics makes no sense. But by using this power, they're able to make computers that are very good at a certain set of tasks that are not necessarily, that are much harder to accomplish by traditional computers. And among those tasks that quantum computers are very, very good at happen to be the fundamental difficult problems behind both the RSA algorithm and the ECC algorithm. So the RSA algorithm at its core is based on factoring extremely large numbers down to their large primes. And this is a problem that's very hard for computers, for traditional computers to do. But it happens, because of the way quantum physics works, that this is a problem that is ludicrously easy for quantum computers to do. The basis of the elliptical curve cryptography algorithm, or ECC algorithm, is finding points on complex multidimensional elliptical curves, which once again is exceedingly hard for a traditional 1-0 gated computer to do, but is trivially easy for a quantum computer to do. And it's just bad luck that the stuff that we found 50 years ago as the basis for our encryption happens to be something that quantum computers can absolutely crush today. And had we made some different choices 50 years ago, perhaps we wouldn't be having this conversation now. But those were the choices that were made when nobody could foresee the consequences. And so somebody named Peter Shor proved this through what's called Shor's algorithm. And basically what Shor's algorithm says is that stuff that should have taken billions of years in the old world is now going to take hours. And when you look at it that way, like, there's nothing we can do. We can't take RSA and make our keys bigger, or ECC and make our keys bigger to solve this problem. It's just the disparity is too much. And so what we have to do is we have to come up with entirely new forms of cryptography. And so this has been done. So NIST led a multi-year search NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. It's out of the United States. Led a multi-year global search for new algorithms. And there are a lot of requirements around these algorithms. They have to work within our existing systems, so they have to be small, they have to be faster to decrypt, they have to have small key sizes, etc. And they have to be not subject to Shor's algorithm. And so this was a big effort and went on for a long time, over a lot of years. And at the end of the day, what happened in 2023, on July 5th, 2023 to be precise, our NIST announced a new set of algorithms that we are going to use. And these algorithms at the time had code names that were called crystals Kyber and crystals dilithium. Now they have real names. They're called MLChem and MLDSA and things along those lines. So MLChem, MLDSA, and two other algorithms have been chosen. And these are going to be the basis for our new algorithm. And the post-quantum cryptography is going to be based on an entirely different scheme. It's what you call lattice-based. And basically what it is a lattice is we know what a lattice is. It looks like graph paper, right? So imagine a very complex multi-dimensional lattice of many, many, many dimensions, thousands of dimensions. And finding points on that lattice and moving from one point to another turns out to be a very tough problem. And it turns out to be a tough problem that quantum computers aren't any better at than regular computers. And so by building cryptographic standards on top of lattice-based cryptography, we can get around this fundamental problem that quantum computers are going to just completely obliterate our existing cryptography. So that's all neat and handy and wonderful, but it's got to be done. And so what happens now? What happens now next is that these algorithms have been settled on. They've moved into industry standards bodies. And the industry standards bodies, which are things like ETSI and CA Browser Forum and IETF, are going to have to go through and they're going to have to make their rules around how this works, because everything has to be interoperable. We have to make certs and everybody has to be able to write software for these certs, and then that all has to work. And you have to know that whatever machine you connect to, wherever it is in the world, and whatever software you buy off the shelf and plug it in, and whatever hardware you get shipped to you and plug it in, it all has to work correctly. And so that's based on standards that are consistent and are well understood and are well vetted and are spread out across, across the full world. So the standards bodies are doing their work now. That's the next step. So IETF right now is taking it. So NIST has released standards. They call these FIPS 203, FIPS 204, and FIPS 205. Case you care. And those have now gone over to IETF, and IETF is building how do you do an X509 certificate around this. And then when that's done, that's going to come to the CA Browser Forum. The CA Browser Forum is going to standardize on, well, what does a public CA need to do in order to be compliant? And then when all of that is done, I'm going to be able to give you a certificate. So this is coming, and this is still going to take a little while. I think this is a couple years away. I think it's probably, if I had to guess, I guess Q4 2026 before you can get a PQC certificate. So then you're going to say, well, why do I care now? That's 2 years away. And the reason you care now is because there's a lot of other preparation that has to go. So the next thing on what happens now is that software, hardware, and services vendors need to incorporate support. So now that these FIPS standards are out and they're standardized, the next thing that happens now is your vendors can start working on support. So they know what the algorithms look like, they know what they're going to do, and they can be updating their software to support those algorithms and work with those algorithms correctly. That's work they can be doing now. That can go onto their roadmaps, they can set schedules, and they can deliver these things. So the next thing that happens is that vendors need to be involved. And this is where you can be involved, because you can talk to your vendors and you can say, what's your strategy? When are you going to have PQC support? What is it going to look like? When should I expect something? I'll tell you right now, most of them are going to say, I don't know. And that's okay. It's okay that they don't know yet, but you want to spur them to start figuring out the answers to that. And the best way to spur that is to actually ask your vendors, hey, when are you going to have this? Because then what'll happen is they'll start talking internally and they'll say, gee, when are we going to have this? And they'll make roadmaps and they'll make plans and they'll make it actually occur. So that's the next step. And then the third step is that enterprises are going to need to apply these things. So your vendors are going to have updates and you're going to have to put these things into production. You're going to have to get the patches or the new software. You're going to have to deploy it. You're going to have to figure out what to do with some hardware or legacy software that perhaps doesn't get PQC updates, where you're just going to be using old encryption that's fundamentally vulnerable, and you're going to have to come up with action plans for this. And those action plans might be, you know what, I can absorb some risk for a little while, or those action plans might be, I absolutely cannot absorb some risk and I need to do something extreme. And that's something that you as an enterprise need to think about, which is how am I going to adjust and how am I going to prepare for this? And we might say, well, you know, again, there's a lot of time. I can't even get a cert for 2 years. Okay. But if you're literally dealing with these hard questions like, where is my cryptography? When am I going to have support for PQC? How am I going to migrate over there? What am I going to do about legacy systems that I can't get PQC support for? You probably need 2 years to work through and solve those problems. So it's a good idea to get going on this now. Because if we get going on this now, we have enough time to really make this right. So enterprises need to make their action plans. I'm going to drill down a little on these points. I went quickly on the other ones. But you need to inventory your cryptography. You need to figure out, what do I have, what certificates do I have, and where are they? What crypto do I have, and where is it? You need to talk to their vendors and say, what are your plans for post-quantum cryptography support? What, you know, when am I going to get support? What is it going to look like? What should I expect? And then make sure that you have a thorough, reliable process for implementing patches. The patches need to be implemented. You need to know they're implemented, and you know that you have PQC riding. You need to know what all your certificates are, and then you need to be able to move your certificates over. And again, all of our certificates are going to need to be swapped out. So if we start thinking about that, and all of our certificates need to be swapped out, that is where automation is important. So once again, we've returned 90-day certs are going to push automation. PQC is going to push automation. At the end of the day, if there is not automation, we're all going to have a really, really bad day. So we're going to need to get automation in place. It is the future. It can't be avoided. We do have a page where you can learn more about this. Sectigo Quantum Labs, which is sectigo.com/quantum-labs. I don't have the URL in here. Apologies for that, but it's sectigo.com/quantum-labs. We'll give you much more information on this. You'll be able to stay current with what's going on. And, you know, that's the big thing that you need to think about. So I crammed a lot in here because there was a lot of discussion, but I want to leave time for Q&A. The last thing I want to say is, if you liked this conversation, I and one of my coworkers, Jason Sirocco, operate a podcast called the Root Causes Podcast. And it is the world's most popular podcast dedicated to digital certificates and PKI. We have more than 400 episodes published. We cover all kind of aspects of the industry, including the sort of thing that you saw today. And so we would love to have you join us on the Root Causes Podcast. Get it wherever you listen to your podcasts. And with that, I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So do we have, Calvin J, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I think just one from my side, Tim.
Okay.
I think if we can just touch on how Sectigo would assist customers in managing all this uncertainty and change coming from you know, some of the decisions that have been made and some of them that will be made. How does Sectigo assist customers in sort of mitigating some of this risk, or automating some of these trivial tasks? Well, I say trivial, but I mean menial is probably the right word.
That's a good word. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, is there anything you can sort of just quickly break down for us in terms of how Sectigo would assist a typical customer going through these uncertain times?
It's a great question, Calvin. I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, there's a lot, and this is something I touched earlier, which is that we have all been used to a very, I would say, static and predictable computing world in terms of digital certificates and cryptography. It really hasn't changed in an important way in decades. And the consequence of that is that we're all used to doing things a certain way, and our systems and our processes and our training and everything is kind of built around that. And so one of the things that we see is that we see a lot of people are a little shocked and aren't really prepared for this new world where our certificates and our crypto are going to be changing on a regular basis. And so what you need is you need a partner who's living in that world. And again, this is where something like CLM really comes in. So it's our job as a public CA to know about changes like the ones you see here. It's our job to know when they're coming and what's going to happen with them and to communicate that information to you, right? Probably most of the people on this call wouldn't have been aware that certificate lifespans were soon to go down to 90 days if we hadn't been out telling you. We saw from the poll that most of us weren't aware of post-quantum cryptography and the threat from quantum computers. That's our job as Sectigo, is to stay current on these things and tell you. Our other job as Sectigo is to provide a platform that you can use. So the Sectigo certificate management, or the Sectigo certificate manager platform, is an automated CLM platform that can just do a lot of this for you. And again, if you have Acme supporting operating systems on your servers, then it can go all the way to actually deploying your certificates, and certificate deployment can go away. So imagine a new world where you have a certain number of certificates, you know what they are, you know where they are, you know when they're coming for expire, you can set them for automatic renewal, and when the time comes, new certificate is provisioned, it is installed on the server, and it's confirmed that it's running correctly, and you never have to do a thing. What are the advantages of that? Less opportunity for error, less time spent on that kind of work when you could be doing other things instead, right? Other things on your roadmap and other opportunity costs that you want to prioritize actually get prioritized and get done. So there's a lot of benefits to the enterprise in automating, and Sectigo is your partner to help you with all of that. SCM has integrations with dozens of popular other software platforms. So if you're using major DevOps platforms or things along those lines, it'll tie right into that, and it really is there to make your life easier and to reduce risk. So that's the role we play.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Tim. I think there's one question here. Will the 90-day change also apply to organization validation, where you previously mentioned domain?
That's a great question. That's a terrific question. I actually get this a lot because people get freaked out and they say, okay, am I going to have to get my organization validated every 90 days? There is nothing to indicate that the browsers intend to reduce what we call the data reuse period for organization validation. So I talked about the data reuse period for DCV, where you have to validate your control of your domain every 90 days. Now there's another part of a cert, which is everything else about your organization. How do we know that you're really the company that you say you are? How do we know that you're really, this company located in this place? And there's hundreds and hundreds of pages of rules that we have to follow to do that correctly. There is nothing to suggest that any browser or anyone else wants to reduce the reuse period below a year, which is what we have right now. So imagine a future where you order a cert, your organization gets validated, you have some kind of automated DCV in place, it does DCV, and then every 60 days, your automated system gets your new cert, automatically does DCV, and installs it. And that runs. And then once a year, we get triggered and we go back and we redo your organization validation, which means you take a phone call one time a year. And then once again, it goes into that automated cycle for another year. So that's a very important point, right? Because people really get worried and freaked out about doing organization validation every 90 days. And there's nothing to suggest that that's going to be in the future for us. It's a great question.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Tim. Jay, any other questions that you've received on your side?
I
Here's
think
a
there is
question.
one more. Yeah.
Yeah. So the guest says, I'm guessing that also the DCV control must be performed every 90 days. If yes, does Sectigo offer any automated solutions for that?
I'm sorry, what was that, Calvin?
I'm guessing that also the DCV control must be performed every 90 days. If yes, does Sectigo offer any automated solution to do that, to do the DCV every 90 days?
That is not something that we are offering today. That is something that is interesting that you bring up. I think that's something we want to talk about. And I think we want to talk about whether we can have something in place in time for when that matters for you. Obviously, we don't need that now. So in that regard, I think we're okay. But I do think that is coming, and it's a valid thing for us to be looking at.
Cool. And then, Tim, I've got another question here that was posed to me privately. Can you potentially just touch on the current state of Entrust certificates? There's been some chat in the markets. Obviously, a lot of customers are familiar with what the happenings. Can you maybe just touch on that from your perspective? And sorry, and obviously the workaround that they've proposed to customers using SSL.com.
Yeah, absolutely. So in case everybody isn't up to date on this, Google Chrome announced about 2 months ago, about July 1 more or less, that it was going to distrust the Entrust root. And this is important. The way they were doing it, they originally announced, was that as of November 1 this year, 2024, any certificates that were issued on the Entrust roots, the 9 roots, would not be trusted in Chrome. This has subsequently been moved to November 12, just to sync up with some other things that Chrome is doing. So up through November 11 of this year, you can get certificates on the Entrust roots and they will be fine. After that, the day after that, you will not. And that means that everybody using Entrust, basically, they need another CA. And they need to do something that isn't using Entrust anymore. Now, what Entrust has offered is for basically for them to be the RA, the registration authority, and get your certs ordered on an SSL.com route. SSL.com is a small regional CA out of Texas, and Entrust is offering this to their customers as a surrogate for their own ability to be a public CA. And this has caused a lot of confusion, I think, among customers who, first of all, it's convoluted and it's just difficult to understand even exactly what's going on here. But, people have had a lot of questions like, how does this work? And I think these are really valid questions. So for instance, if Entrust is going to be the RA, and that means Entrust is going to do the organizational validation, and that was how they got in trouble last time, and that's how they got distrusted, then, are we concerned that we're going to have the same thing again, that we're going to have misissued certs that came out of Entrust and, massive revocation events and all of the problems that we had the first time? So I think a lot of people are worried about that being viable from the perspective of the organization that did this so badly that they got distrusted is going to continue to be our RA, and we're going to continue to be kind of at the mercy of their competence and their willingness to do things correctly. So that's worry number one. Worry number two is, can SSL.com scale to this? SSL.com, like I said, they're quite small. To put things in perspective, the total number of EV certs that SSL.com has right now is 50. 50, that's it. So, a single Entrust customer probably has more than 50 EV certs. So do we really believe that SSL.com is going to be able to scale up to this level? And so we're talking to a lot of people, again, around the globe, including some real IT leaders, major banks, major Global 2000 companies, major tech leaders who just don't view this as a viable alternative. And so many enterprises right now are in the process of trying to figure out what else they should do to replace their Entrust public certificates. If you are using Entrust public certificates and this isn't on your radar, it needs to get on your radar right now. And you need to decide if you're willing to absorb that kind of risk, the RA risk, the SL.com risk, this whole weird convoluted thing. You're going to have to change out your certs anyway. You're going to have to change your routes anyway. Or is this the right time to move to a different provider who doesn't have these problems and doesn't have these concerns? And everybody who uses Entrust, if you're not thinking about this problem now, if you're not actively working on a solution, this needs to be your first priority. You need to be making a considered decision about whether you're willing to stick with this and absorb that risk, or if you want to go somewhere where you don't have to.
Sure. Thank you for that, Tim. Great answer. We've got one last question. I'm just cognizant of the fact that we've got four minutes left. Will the 90 days apply to internal Microsoft CA as well? That's a question that was posed to me.
That's a great question. This is only public certificates. Chrome does not have the right to tell us what to do with our own certificates. So if you're using an internal Microsoft CA or an internal managed CA, that's the kind of thing that Sectigo or other people can provide to you, that is up to you. You can make your certificates any term you want. Now, I'm still going to encourage you to consider shorter certificate lifespans for the reasons I told you. They're safer. But that is not for Chrome to dictate. And rather, each of us individually can decide that. So no, your internal CA certs are not going to be put on the same kind of time frame. Those you will be able to decide for yourself.
Cool. Thank you for that. Any other questions from the audience before we start wrapping up? I haven't seen anything new come in. Just quickly have a peek here. No, I think we're good. Yeah, so thank you for that, Tim. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. Otherwise, thank you everyone in the audience for attending. I trust it was very informative. If there's any additional information you require, please, our details are available on all the collateral shared pre this session. So reach out if you just want to have a conversation around the things that are happening. Give us a shout. More than happy to set up some time. We can take you through the Sectigo product offering. We can help you even design a migration path from Entrust. So yeah, give us a shout. Always happy to have conversations, and thank you very much again for joining. Once again, the recording will be available after this if you'd like to share.